Namequest, a story by Toby Wacker, 2011. The rabbit burst from cover, almost beneath his hooves. Ashiek startled and took off after it. Reaching for his bow out of habit, he remembered just in time that he wasn't hunting today. He slowed and watched the rabbit flick out of sight through the dense grass. He grunted in annoyance. Maybe he should have shot after all. If he did have meat tonight, who would know? He hadn't wanted to come on this name quest in the first place, let alone follow the rules. He turned away. The sun was sinking in the sky behind him, spreading a red light over everything. Off to the left, the bones cast long shadows onto the trees behind them. He hadn't wanted to come, but here he was, and he might as well go through with it without cheating. He trotted through the grass to his camp, well within sight of the bones, but farther along the forest edge. His fire was still banked on the tall mound of earth and stones, built by other centaurs who had come to the bones to find their name. He set his useless bow and arrows down nearby and grimaced. "Too old," he muttered. "I'm not old at all. Why should centaurs find names when they're hardly more than foals? I don't see the sense in it." Noeasy Tracks the Sun, leader of the herd, had not agreed. "Ashiek, Ashiek, Ashiek," she had said, shaking her head. "What a name! It isn't even a name. It is only something to call you. All the other young ones have found their names long ago. Some have even outgrown their first one and found another. And you?" she snorted. "You stay here, hunting and talking and passing the days, with what seems to be no urge to find your name so that you can start living." Ashiek flushed. "I am living," he protested. "Hunting, talking, grazing. Those count as much as anything. Why do I need a name for any of that? Something to call me, that's all people need. And they have that. It works just fine." "You are too old to be satisfied with that." Tracks the Sun put her hands on her hips. "Have you no sense of curiosity? You've never even seen the bones." He shifted his feet, avoiding her gaze. "Almost every day the herd moves somewhere else, and I see new places and things, rivers and forests and living creatures, much more interesting than old dead bones that we don't even know who or what they're from." "It isn't the same," she told him. "The bones have a magic of their own. If you'd ever been there, you'd know that." She looked him up and down. "But you haven't, and it doesn't look like you're going to without a bit of a push. There's no good talking any more about it. You, my boy, are going on a name quest. Consider it the will of the herd." She wheeled and cantered away, leaving Ashiek to stamp the ground in frustration. And now he was here, whether he liked it or not, almost at the bones. When it was full dark, Ashiek stood staring into his fire, chewing a handful of grass. It was the only food eaten by questers when they were this close to the bones. Anything else was said to dull the senses and make the mind less open to the bones' magic. He wasn't sure he wanted to be open to the bones' magic, but he had come this far. The journey here had taken only a day, which he supposed was lucky. Sometimes the herd was grazing many days distant from the bones when a centaur traveled to them for a name quest. Still, it was longer than he had ever spent alone before. Even at night, he was used to hearing the quiet stamps and whispers of the herd around him. Despite that, when he knocked the fire down and closed his eyes, he fell asleep quickly. The next day was mostly something to wait through for the night to come. The bones, he knew, worked their strongest magic in dreams and in dark. You have weird dreams, and you just know, one of the other centaurs had said after returning from the bones. Nevertheless, part of a name quest was spending the day by the bones, and so, in the morning, Ashiok walked over to them and settled to wait. Smooth, pale mounds lay scattered around the remnants of the rib cage, sharp rods curving out at angles twice as tall as his head. The clouds drifted across the sky. Throughout the day, as he grazed and paced around the bones, he thought about his name. He was finding it more peaceful to be alone than he had expected, with just the clouds and the wind in the grass and the ripple of the water in the forest stream when he refilled his water skins. Maybe his name would be something like that. Likes peace? He shook his head. That was ridiculous. Watches clouds? Sits by water? Some young centaurs, when they went on a name quest, already had their name in mind and only needed it confirmed. Some had vague ideas, or formed them during the journey, or the waiting day. Others, like him, didn't know until they dreamed. After the sun was well set, he walked nervously into the center of the rib cage. 4 of the moons were up. Giza lights the night cast a cold, pale violet glow over everything, a stark light in which Ashiok could see the bones looming around him, with the forest a dark mass behind. He shivered, although it was warm. Half the ribs were lit up sharp and bright, the rest black spikes of shadow. He shifted his weight restlessly. He didn't think he was likely to fall asleep, but he bowed his head and let his mind drift, and after a time, his thoughts slipped into dreams. He dreamed of moons chasing him across the sky, of grass taller than he was. A rabbit bounded out to cock its head and look at him. "What's your name?" it asked him. Before he could answer, he heard mocking laughter, and a wood sprite sprang into view. "He has no name yet, fool," it said, and turned to stare at Ashiok. "This is your name." He waved his hand. In front of him passed images of the herd, the plains, the forests, fish flickering through a stream, foals learning the stamp song. A dragonfly flew by, lazily turning circles. "Do you see your name?" it whispered. Ashiok stared at the dream images. The sun, the moons, himself hunting, a downpour of rain. "No," he said. "Ah, how strange." The dragonfly spun in midair. "It's right there in front of you." Then, all at once, he was awake. A pale light shone in strips before him. He blinked, and it became the rising sun behind the tall pillars of the ribs. He rubbed his eyes in disbelief. It was morning, but he still didn't know his name. His dreams tumbled through his mind, each image more confusing than the last. The dragonfly, the rabbit, the wood sprite. None of them had actually said what his name was. It was as much a puzzle as when he first came. What had gone wrong? A centaur always comes back from the bones with a new name. Had he missed something in his dreams? He paced to one of the ribs and rested his forehead against it, thinking. Then he realized, of course, a centaur always came back with a name. They were thinking about it even before they left the herd. "This is your name," their dream told them, and, eager to agree, They decided that they saw their truest self in one of the images. That was all there was to it. The only reason he still didn't know his name was because he didn't want to. Ashiok threw back his head and roared with laughter. Then he broke into a gallop back towards the herd. When he reached them late that afternoon, he told No Easy Tracks the Sun what had happened. After staring at him for a few moments, she snorted and shook her head. "Since you seem to need no name," she said, "we might as well call you that." And Ashiok Needs No Name did not choose to return to the bones for a long, long time.